You should be ashamed of yourself, Samantha. Show up to your own brother's engagement gala wearing that pathetic, cheap costume? My mother, Samantha Sr., who insisted everyone call her Eleanor, slammed her crystal champagne flute onto the mahogany podium, her voice reverberating through the gilded loudspeakers of the Grand Bellevue Ballroom. Over 100 high society guests in tuxedos and designer gowns froze, turning their gazes toward the heavy double doors where I stood. I stood erect in my tailored Air Force service dress uniform, my hands resting at my sides, my right index finger tapping a subtle rhythm against the seam of my slacks, a subconscious habit formed over 8 years as Major Samantha Reed, Chief Operations Officer for Air Force Special Reconnaissance and Intelligence. Beside my mother, on the flower-draped stage, stood my younger brother, Brandon, wearing a custom tuxedo alongside his fiancée, Jessica, whose diamond necklace caught the glitter of the chandeliers. Hanging directly behind them was a massive velvet banner that read, "Celebrating Brandon Reed, new CEO of Reed Aerospace and Defense." "Mom, please," I said, keeping my voice dead even, using the flat, controlled tone I had honed during combat debriefings in Eastern Europe. "You sent me an urgent priority message 2 hours ago stating that Dad's medical trustee required my physical presence to sign his end-of-life care documents." "I lied to get you into this room," Eleanor barked into the microphone, her diamond rings flashing under the spotlights as a harsh, bitter laughter echoed across the hall. "Your brother spent 6 years building Reed Aerospace into a $50 million defense contracting powerhouse, while you hid away in military barracks, playing dress-up in that low-tier uniform, refusing to give a single dollar from your officer salary to support your dying father's medical foundation?" Brandon stepped forward, gently taking the microphone from my mother, casting a sorrowful, disappointed look across the room that sent an icy shiver straight down my spine. "It's all right, Mom," Brandon murmured into the sound system, his voice dripping with practiced, tragic sincerity. "Samantha has always carried deep operational jealousy. While I was working 20-hour days to secure major logistics contracts to save our family's heritage, Samantha was sitting in comfortable administrative offices overseas, shuffling files. We can't all possess business intellect." A cold wave of hostile whispering rippled through the ballroom. High-profile investors, city council members, and military contractors shook their heads in contempt. A local news crew covering the gala pivoted their camera lens directly toward my face, zooming in on my silver rank insignia and steady eyes. "She doesn't even have the decency to dress like a woman," Eleanor shouted, taking a sharp step toward the edge of the stage, her face twisted in rage. "Security, escort this embarrassment off the premises before she ruins Brandon's investor announcements." 2 hulking private security guards stepped from the perimeter, closing in on my flanks, but before their fingers could make contact with my sleeves, a tall, iron-jawed man sitting alone at a front-row VIP table set his silver pen down with a loud, distinct click and stood up. He was wearing an impeccably tailored Air Force service dress uniform, adorned with 4 gleaming silver stars on each shoulder. General Arthur Montgomery, Commander of Air Force Material Command and head of Federal Defense Procurement. The entire ballroom went dead silent. The 2 security guards froze in their tracks, staring at the 4-star general in absolute shock. "Mrs. Reed," General Montgomery's voice cut through the silence like a steel blade, quiet yet carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You might want to review your company's classified founding charter before you order security to remove the officer who owns 80% of your intellectual property." Eleanor's triumphant smirk dissolved instantly. Brandon's hand tightened on the brass podium until his knuckles turned ghost white. "General Montgomery?" Eleanor stuttered into the microphone, her voice losing its icy polish for the first time. I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. This is a private corporate celebration for my son's new CEO appointment. Samantha is just a mid-level logistics clerk. General Montgomery didn't even look at Eleanor. He turned toward me, snapped his boots together with a sharp crack, and raised his right hand in a rigid, flawless military salute. Major Reed, General Montgomery said loudly enough for every guest in the room to hear clearly. Operation Phantom Ledger has been fully executed by Defense Crim Services. The floor is yours, ma'am. My mother blinked frantically, looking back and forth between the general and my calm face. What operation? What is he talking about, Julian? Julian didn't answer. A single drop of cold sweat rolled down his temple, dripping onto his silk lapel. I took 3 deliberate steps forward, my polished dress shoes clicking against the marble floor. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, heavy silver encryption key, the exact key my father had secretly handed to me in a sealed envelope 4 days before he slipped into a coma. 6 years ago, I said, my voice cutting through the silent room with absolute clarity. My father suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke. My mother told me the family business was bankrupt, that my father's life support costs were $30,000 a month, and that if I didn't sign over my military power of attorney to Julian, Dad would be removed from his private medical facility. "Don't listen to her," Victoria shrieked, rushing to the front of the stage. "She's unstable. She suffers from severe psychological trauma from her overseas deployments. She's hallucinating." I signed the military power of attorney, I continued, ignoring my mother completely as the crowd watched the stage in mounting horror. And for 6 straight years, $12,000 a month was automatically deducted from my hazard pay, my flight bonuses, and my intelligence officer pension trust. I lived in a sparse, drafty rental house near the airbase, wearing worn uniforms, believing every dollar was keeping my father alive in a specialized neurorehabilitation center. "It was," Victoria yelled, her hands shaking violently as she gestured toward the crowd. "Every cent went to his private doctors." "Then why?" General Sterling spoke up, pulling a heavy blue folder from his briefcase. "Does the Federal Medical Registry show that your husband, Colonel Thomas Vance, was transferred to a fully covered Veterans Affairs hospice facility in San Antonio 5 years ago, paid for entirely by the federal government?" The silence in the ballroom was heavy. You could hear the soft humming of the ventilation system. Victoria froze as if she had been turned to stone. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "You lied to me for 5 years, Mom," I said, looking her straight in the eyes, my heart pounding with a mixture of old grief and cold, unyielding resolve. "You told me Dad was in a localized coma, that visitors weren't allowed due to strict infection protocols. You sent me fake monthly medical reports signed with a stolen physician's stamp, just so you and Julian could siphon nearly $1 million of my combat pay to fund your lavish lifestyle." "Evelyn," Julian stammered, stepping away from the podium, his voice cracking as he held up his hands. "Evelyn, listen to me. It wasn't my idea. Mom said you were deployed in classified zones and would never check the local medical records. She said we needed the capital to keep the Vance Aerospace brand alive." "You coward!" Victoria screamed, turning around and striking Julian across the chest with her leather purse. "You were the one who demanded the luxury penthouse in Manhattan. You forged your sister's signature on the corporate merger documents." "I forged them because you told me she would sign them anyway," Julian yelled back, shoving our mother's hands away, as the high society crowd watched the two of them turn on each other like wild animals. Before anyone else could speak, I pressed the side button on my silver encryption key. The key sent an encrypted signal directly to the venue's audiovisual suite, overriding the display system. The giant velvet banner behind them automatically retracted, revealing a massive LED screen that flickered to life. Instead of promotional videos for Vance Aerospace, the screen displayed a real-time federal audit log from the Department of Defense, with red seals and verified bank account routing numbers. Source account: Major E. Vance, Combat Hazard Pay, Intel Trust. Destination account, Vance Aerospace Offshore Holdings. Total illegal transfers, $864,000. Classified patent design 944B, registered solely to Major E. Vance. You thought Vance Aerospace was built on Julian's genius, I said, looking at the stunned faces of the 90 investors in the audience. Julian didn't design the stealth drone navigation system that secured your $50 million government contract. I designed it during my night shifts in Afghanistan. I patented it under my military clearance. Julian stole the blueprints from my personal safe using the power of attorney Mom manipulated me into signing. No, that patent belongs to the family, Julian shouted, his eyes wild with terror as he looked at the screens. A military power of attorney does not grant legal authorization to transfer intellectual property or commit federal fraud, Mr. Vance, General Sterling stated coldly. At that exact moment, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung wide open once again. 6 uniformed federal marshals, accompanied by special agents from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, AFOSI, marched down the central carpeted aisle, their tactical boots striking the floor in synchronized rhythm. The lead AFOSI special agent walked straight up the steps of the stage, stopping directly between my mother and brother. Victoria Vance, Julian Vance, the agent announced, his voice booming clearly across the sound system. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, multi-year military pension theft, corporate espionage, and unauthorized exploitation of classified defense technology. Get your hands off me, Victoria shrieked, as a female marshal pulled her arms behind her back, the sharp, heavy click-click of steel handcuffs locking over her wrists. Do you know who I am? I am Victoria Vance. I run the city's highest charity board. Your charity board, the agent replied with absolute indifference, has already been frozen by state prosecutors following Major Vance's submission of sworn affidavits and forensic bank ledgers. Julian offered no resistance. He dropped to his knees on the stage floor, weeping hysterically, his hands cuffed behind his back, as his fiancée, Chloe, slipped her diamond engagement ring off her finger, tossed it onto his lap, and walked away without looking back. Evelyn, stop them, please! Victoria sobbed, her face contorted in desperate, ugly panic as she was hauled toward the stage steps. We are your blood. You can't let strangers put your own mother and brother in prison. I stood straight, my shoulders back, my chin high, looking at my mother with calm, unshakable dignity. You told me I should be ashamed of this uniform, Mom, I said softly, my voice carrying across the entire room. This uniform represents honor, truth, and discipline. 3 things you sold for money you didn't earn. As the federal marshals marched my mother and brother down the aisle past a crowd of disgusted investors who were already pulling their funding, General Sterling stepped alongside me. He didn't offer empty words of sympathy. He simply offered a crisp, solemn nod of utter respect. Slowly, every military contractor, city official, and veteran in the ballroom stood up from their tables, breaking into a thunderous, rising ovation that echoed off the high ceilings, honoring the true officer who had stood her ground against absolute deceit. I took a deep, clean breath of air, feeling the heavy burden of 6 years of betrayal dissolve into the quiet certainty of earned justice. You cannot cure toxic people by sacrificing your own life, your honor, or your truth. For 6 long years, I allowed my family to manipulate my sense of duty, believing that my endurance and my silence were proof of my devotion to my father.
I let them insult my choices, diminish my achievements, and steal my hard-earned income because I believed that preserving family harmony was worth any personal cost. But manipulative, greedy people do not view your silence as love. They view it as permission to exploit you further. They will steal your work, dismantle your dignity, and publicly humiliate you, all while convincing the world that you are the failure. Real peace does not come from quietly enduring abuse to protect people who hurt you. Real peace comes from standing firm in your integrity, stepping into the light of truth, and allowing the unyielding consequences of their own actions to dismantle their lies. Never set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm.